Hello, my fellow warriors. Welcome to the Warrior Insights channel, where today's topic of discussion will be nuclear war and building yourself a nuclear war survival kit in case you have to transition from one place to another in an emergency. This video is a complement to my Substack article, which can be found at athenaangelique.substack.com. If you'd like also to give me any news articles or news topics you'd like me to report on, please send them to warriorinsights1, that's the number 1, at gmail.com. I never thought in my lifetime that I would be talking about nuclear war. Now, growing up in the 80s and 90s, we never had to deal with what people had to deal with before my generation, such as the hiding under your desks for nuclear threats when we had the Cuban Missile Crisis going on. So I never had to live through that, but I did live through Operation Desert Storm. I remember tying yellow ribbons on trees for our troops. And then we went into the more vague wars, such as the war on drugs. We had the DARE come to our school, and I was a DARE kid. We learned about drugs and resisting and saying no to drugs. But then we had the war on drugs, which obviously never really materialized into anything of significance because we still have it in our country and in our world today. Then we had the war on terror. And as you know, of the tragic events that happened on September 11th, whether or not you believe it was an inside job, regardless, we still went over to Afghanistan and we continued that for decades. And we saw how atrocious the pullout from Afghanistan ended up. Now we have a different kind of war. This was initially a proxy war, which you can say was between Ukraine and Russia. But as this develops further, as we approach the 1-year mark on the Ukraine-Russia, it's basically a Russia-NATO war at this point. And I would say we are in World War III. It just hasn't been, let's say, officially declared. What will that take to be officially declared? Well, probably either a false flag event or a actual nuclear explosion or some kind of edge-pushing event over there. But who wins? Let's ask ourselves who wins in these wars, because it's certainly not you or I. We don't win. The contractors win. The politicians whose pockets are lined by war win. We don't. And I'll show you that right now. Let's look at the defense contractors with the highest revenue. Now, this is in 2021 alone. Okay, this is the defense revenue in 2021 for Lockheed Martin. You have over $64.4 million. Raytheon, we could see $42 million. Boeing, $35, almost $36 million. Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, BAE Systems, all upwards of $25 and $30 million. L3 Harris, $15 million, and more. Let's look at this chart, which I know it looks a little bit small on your screen right now, but if you view it in my Substack, it comes out a little bit larger. Number one, this was for 2019, my new 2019. Keep that in mind when you look at this chart. Okay, this is fiscal year 2019. Lockheed Martin is number one at 40.34 million. Boeing, 22.19 million. Raytheon, 20.6 million. General Dynamics, 17.29 million. Pfizer, 13.32 million. Why is Pfizer on the DoD contractor chart for fiscal year 2019? I want you to think about that. And just know that the DoD and DARPA has been partnered with Pfizer since at least 2013. Now, I didn't get to dive into that too deeply for this particular video, but I just found that very interesting. Then let's look at our lovely politicians. The current Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, served on the board of Raytheon. And the Secretary of State, the current Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, is tied with Austin to Pine Island Capital Partners, just to name a few. Pine Island Capital Partners is a large investment firm that has raised hundreds of $1,000,000 of acquisitions in defense companies, according to the New York Times. It's a revolving door, people. Well, Angelique, you can say, well, the destruction is, well, over there. But what happens when the destruction comes to the shores of the United States? In the form of an electromagnetic pulse or a nuclear detonation. We just had not one, but 2 spy balloons floating over the United States. One wasn't detected for a period of several days, and the other was shot down immediately as to show a sign of, yeah, we're on it. But hey, we weren't for that first one. How many others have we not been aware of? And where is this going? Do you even know where to start if a nuclear emergency happens? Do you know what to do with your family? Well, according to the New York City Emergency Management Administration, these are their 3 instructions for you in the case of a nuclear emergency. Get inside, stay inside, and stay tuned. While this woman, who is probably an AI bot of some kind, calmly guides you through these 3 steps in this video that was recently released, I would like to say, hey, guess what? Especially on the last one, if an EMP detonates, there won't be a media to stay tuned to. There may not be any mass communication restored for decades. So are you just going to get inside, stay inside, and stay a sitting duck? I don't know about you, but that's certainly not something I'm going to be doing. And if I am going to be staying inside, you best believe I am going to be well protected and have plenty of food and water and everything I need to defend myself and my property for what's coming or potentially coming, but I'd rather be prepared than be unprepared. Let's go into what is an EMP for those of you who are not quite aware. It is a burst of electromagnetic radiation that can be caused by a nuclear explosion, a solar flare, or high-altitude nuclear explosion. What did I talk about just before? The high-altitude stratospheric balloons, which can definitely release one of these EMP devices. The pulse can potentially damage or disable electronic devices, including computers, communications, and power grids. Now, these power grids can take decades to restore, depending on the depth of the destruction, the size of the EMP, etc. But you have to think to yourself, well, great. If one of those goes off, aren't we all dead anyway? No, hardly. It just depends on where you are. It depends on the size of the bomb, the distance from the blast, and the level of preparedness and protection of the individual. So that is one of the reasons why I'm making this video here today. Then we could talk about the different types of nuclear weapons. We have a tactical one, which is less than 10 kilotons, an immediate yield, which is in between 10 and 100 kilotons, and a strategic nuclear weapon, which is around 100 kilotons. But how are these weapons typically delivered? Well, we have different types. They can do ballistic missiles from fixed or mobile launchers on land, sea, and air. Bombers can be flying long distances. But one thing I'd like to draw your attention to here are submarines. In addition to these mystery balloons floating over the United States, we also had this lovely ship off the coast of Hilo, Hawaii on January 10th and 11th of this year. And while this is not uncommon, it is concerning. And especially the timing of this, January 10th and 11th, before these mystery balloons appeared over the United States. Did they really come from China? We may never know. This was considered an intelligence ship, and you just never know. The one was similarly seen over Florida in 2019. So it's definitely out there. Then we talk about the weights. The weights, can a balloon carry a nuclear weapon? Yes, it can. And as I talked in my previous Substack about the Chinese balloons and the capabilities of high altitude stratospheric balloons, China just unveiled one in September of 2022 that showed a 1.2 ton payload on there. So, yes, it can carry it, even though it may not be the most preferred method to carry one with a higher payload, it still would work. So, let's get into it. I just want to remind you that this guide is for if you have to transition from point A to point B. The items will be discussed here. So what types of items should I have in my nuclear survival kit? Now, the spark for this video came from another video that I watched from the Canadian prepper who discussed all these items. I researched all of the items that he discussed, and I kind of added my own take on it. This was a picture from his video which shows most of the items that I'm going to talk about below. So, first, what should you have? A Nuclear War Survival Skills Handbook. Now, this handbook that I mention here is the foremost guide on what to do in the case of nuclear attack. It has been written and rewritten numerous times to make sure that the normal person can understand it. It's not too high tech. It's got diagrams. It's extremely easy to understand, and they made it that way on purpose, and they edited it that way on purpose. There is a free PDF that you can find of this book online, but if you'd like to have it in a hard copy or a paperback copy, I included the link to this in my Substack. Then once you read and you're prepared, you can prepare your homestead with this book as well, or you could even build, it gives you guidance on how to build nuclear shelters, fallout shelters, using some basic equipment like dirt and shovels, which is really awesome. Then you have to worry about radioactive fallout protection. Note that there are alpha and beta particles, which we'll get to, but you want to be protective. Know that the fallout can start happening within 24 hours and remain radioactive for the first 2 to 4 weeks, which is the typical half-life of the majority of particles, depending on your location relative to the detonation. Some of the particles, again, relative to the location of detonation, may be active for years, such as the Chernobyl site. This is really important if you live in high-risk areas such as cities, areas near military bases, or areas near intercontinental ballistic missile silos. You should really be aware of what to do because these are high target areas, obviously. Well, going into a little bit further, we have MREs, which are a source of nutrition that you don't have to do anything to. They're wrapped in multiple layers, they're easily transportable, they're practically indestructible, and they don't require any special equipment to prepare. They are high-calorie foods so that they could get you through the day, even if you just have one. Now we're going to talk about the personal protection from those alpha and beta particles. Alpha particles can just land on your skin or your clothing, so that's where that New York City emergency management says, get inside, remove clothing, and shower with soap or shampoo. That's kind of like those alpha particles. But then we have beta particles, which require a level B hazmat suit, such as this one here. This one it just covers you against chemical and biological contaminants. You can hose this off when you come back inside, and this covers your face around the mask. It also has elastic around the wrists and your ankles and keeps you sealed up. They also have something a little bit more fancy called a mop suit, which is a little bit more high tech, and it's cloth and it's more comfortable and breathable, but it's also around $1,000. So it just depends on your level of comfort on where you want to go with this. The Mira safety suit can get very hot and very uncomfortable quickly, but it just, again, depends on your level of how prepared you want to be. Then we have chemical tape or duct tape that you can wrap around your wrists and your boots. You're going to want some thick rubber gloves and some over boots to go over your shoes in case, so you don't have to trample that stuff inside. You could hose yourself down and be completely decontaminated before you go inside your shelter. Of course, you're going to need a gas mask. A standard CBRN gas mask will be just fine. But they have this device called a PAPR, which is interesting. This device actually helps you do the breathing. It puts the filters on you, and it has a fan. And since the filters, in a normal gas mask, if you put the filters on, it increases the breathing resistance. The negative pressure of the gas mask will cause you to tire faster. So if you know you have to go long distances, or you're going to spend long distances outside to get from your transition point from A to B, then you may want to consider this PAPR. It will help you last longer in your treks, even if you're a very fit person. Breathing negative air flow or negative pressure can be very tiring. It's kind of like walking on high altitude. If you're not used to high altitude environments, this can just make everything a little bit more comfortable for you. You're going to need the standard NATO specific 40 millimeter gas mask filters for that. Then you may want to consider a foldable shovel, such as this one here. This could be for trenching. So let's say you are in a wooded environment and there's radiation around you, but you are completely exhausted. If you want to protect your body from radiation, you could dig into the ground and kind of trench yourself to prevent the more radiation from being absorbed into your body than absolutely necessary. Not only that, but digging holes, you could do lots of things in the wildlife with a shovel. So it's good to have. Then you want to talk about information gathering methods, such as a radio, one of those hand crank ones that have a solar strip on it, something tiny, just to see if there's anybody out there broadcasting anything on AM, FM, shortwave, police, radio stations, that you can hear what's going on out there, news, any type of information that anybody might be able to have. You also would like means to communicate with others in your group, such as the two-way radios, Baofeng radios, or anything like that, but make sure that they are secured in something like a Faraday bag, so that if you do get hit by an EMP, that this is all protected and that your electronics won't fry. You also want to be able to communicate with each other. If one of your partners wants to go one way to check out a route to see if that's viable and you have to go the other way, or if you get separated for whatever reason, you can always talk to one another, and that's important. Then you want to have radiation detection equipment, such as a Geiger counter, so you know what kind of radiation you're walking into, where it's more dangerous and where it may be safe. And it'll allow you to record this data and show you how dangerous it is outside. You may just step outside for a minute in your hazmat suit and determine that everything is okay, maybe at the 2-week mark, or if you want to test it every couple of days to see where you're at. This is something definitely good to have. You need to know. Information is golden, especially when it comes to radiation. You don't want to expose yourself too long if the radiation particles are very high in your environment. But if it's safe and you can exit and you need to exit, this will be a good guide for you. Moving on, I'd like to suggest you consider taking potassium iodide tablets. This protects your thyroid from absorbing dangerous amounts of radiation. So if you're pre-treating your thyroid with healthy iodine, then you go into a radioactive environment, then radioactive material can't enter your thyroid, and it acts kind of like a blocker. The recommended dosage is adults taking 2 per day for 2 to 4 weeks after a nuclear incident, and to have 2 or 3 boxes or bottles on hand per person for each member of your family, just to be prepared. Then we also have to talk about personal protection, which is extremely important, because you don't know who wants something that you have. Or you may come across a wild animal in the wilderness that you have to deal with or kill for food. You just never know. So, one of the items the Canadian Prepper talks about is this really neat foldable device that you can see on your screen. And it's only 8 shots and it's just a 22. But you know what? If you got to kill something or do something in a pinch, it's compact, it's lightweight, the military use it, and it looks pretty neat to me. I mean, of course, you could always carry your own smaller personal carry, which is fine as well, but I thought this was a pretty neat suggestion. Then you might want to, if you're going to be out in an area of wilderness that has fish, you may want to have have a little fishing kit on you so you can catch those fish. Be aware of bottom feeders. Also, if you are going to shoot animals or fish, be aware that the skin and bones of an animal may contain radiation, and bottom feeding fish may be ingesting radioactive isotopes. So be careful what you eat when you are in a radioactive environment. Then there's something called a perimeter triple arm, which is pretty neat. You can attach it to different trees and you could set up a perimeter and be alerted to any intruders that may decide to encroach your camp while you're sleeping. It kind of gives you a little bit of a peace of mind. A large explosion will happen and it hopefully will scare the intruder, wake you up, and you should be good, hopefully. A thermal monocular is pretty neat to determine the presence of any type of animal or predator that may enter your campsite in the dark. It's pretty pricey though, so this is kind of one of those luxury items. But if you have the money and you think it's a good investment, or if you're an avid hunter and think it's a good investment, well, go for it. Then we have portable foldable solar panels, which are pretty neat here. This is pretty cool. This actually rolls up into a bundle and it works in low light conditions and it's pretty indestructible and you could charge several devices. And it's just pretty good to have, lightweight, flexible. And then you may want to consider an emergency phone charger. The one I listed here is a disposable phone charger that you can use to charge up your phone one time. It gives you gain up to 4 hours of talk and text. And if the phone system does work, great, then you can use it. But I thought this was pretty neat that he suggested that. Then I have a survival knife or machete, common sense, a multi-tool, a foldable saw. A foldable saw is pretty neat in case you need to cut down firewood, your path is obstructed, and it just seems like an overall good idea to have something like that. Flashlights, absolutely 100% requirement. You could even include headlamps as well, just so you don't have to carry it in your hands. But the flashlight I included in my Substack is solar powered. It floats, it's waterproof. It contains a micro USB power bank. I say have at least 2 flashlights on you in your bug out bag or your nuclear survival kit at all times. One that is battery powered and one that is rechargeable, just in case for whatever reason one doesn't work or one dies. You always have the backup one while the other one is charging, or you just need 2. Flashlights run out quickly, especially if you're trekking during the wintertime and limited daylight hours. This one is also important too, because how many people still carry a map? Not many. I know that I have atlases for decorative purposes, but you have to think about, if an EMP goes off, you're not going to have access to GPS, you're not going to have access to your phone. Do you know how to navigate your area without a GPS? Do you know the land navigation, the topography of your area? If not, I suggest, well, even if you did, it depends on how far you have to go. I suggest getting a hard map, one with detailed topography, so that you know where you're going and you could orient yourself and direct yourself with your compass. Having a tritium lensatic compass is crucial because it's accurate. You open it up and it has a lens there that you can line yourself up with and make sure that you're going in the right direction. Every step in the wrong direction is wasted time, energy, and effort. You want to make sure you get to where you need to go as quickly and efficiently as possible. If you get one of those cheapo compasses that were built into some kind of tactical bracelet that somebody made for you, your chances of getting to where you need to go quickly, let's just say they're not as good as buying a very decent compass. Then you have to think about medical necessities such as Israeli bandage and tourniquets. I have used tourniquets in the past, and I will say that they work. Here is the tourniquet that I used in the field. Don't buy a cheap tourniquet. I implore you, do not buy a cheap tourniquet. The rumors of these tourniquets snapping and failing is definitely not something you want to face out on the field. If you or someone you love is bleeding out, you need to stop the bleeding. This is one of the best tourniquets that I have used personally on gunshot victims and car crash victims. It saves lives. Definitely carry one. For the price, it's worth it if it saves your life. And that's all I really have to say about that. Just think about your life on that one, or your family member's life. Then they have this really neat survival cord, which it includes, if you peel it open, it includes 30 gauge snare wire, 25-pound fishing line, and waterproof tinder. I mean, you could take this thing apart. You could use it as a whole rope, or you could take it apart and get all these multitude of uses for this. You could use rope for anything. I mean, creating a tent. I don't know. There's so much stuff to it. Then we have antibiotic ointment you should carry along with the medical field. Some kind of shelter. It depends on how much room you want to take up in your bag. You're going to want to have a wool blanket or some kind of blanket, or like one of those emergency survival foldable blankets that are super tiny. They could just unwrap, kind of like what they give marathon runners after a marathon. You're going to want one of those, or a plastic sheathing and a tarp, something that will make you a little bit of a shelter. Then we go into a scarf, a shemag, they call it. You know, it's a funny, I've never heard of the term until now, but it's very good to have just for a multitude of reasons, such as clothing, a bandage, a sling, a mask to protect your face, a cloth to protect your neck from sun and bug bites, just to name a few. It's good to have a cloth. You could even use it as a blanket if you need to. You could use it as a wash rag, a towel. It's a multitude of uses for sure. Then you got to think about water purification. First of all, you have to think, how am I going to collect this water, and how am I going to purify the water once I find a water source? A life straw will purify the water for you on a near instant basis, but then you need to think about having a container to hold the water in if you're not going to directly drink it from the stream. Water purification tablets, you grab your container, you put those little tabs in, you wait an hour, and the water is good to drink. So that's why I list here the single-walled stainless steel container, because you can put this directly into a fire and not have to worry about anything exploding. The stainless steel can contain your water and boil it and make it healthy for you to drink. Then for bathing purposes or fire purposes, a compressed towel is pretty neat to have, such as this one. They're like hockey pucks, and you could use it as a fire starter, a towel, a bandage, a washcloth. There's so many uses for these things, and they don't take up a lot of space. They're ultra light. You don't have to worry about that, but it's definitely a good thing to have. Then I want to talk about having a USB stick preloaded with copies of your important documents. Why is this important? If you have to leave your home in a rush, you're going to need some way of identifying yourself eventually. You're going to need some kind of proof that maybe the house that got destroyed in the nuclear incident is absolutely your house. If you have a copy of your deed, if you have a copy of your passport, your driver license, your living will, any type of pet documentation, some kind of medication record on a USB drive. Now make sure it's in your Faraday bag, or make sure it's sealed so that it doesn't get destroyed by an EMP. Or you could carry the paper copies of these versions, but again, if you're shoving everything into a backpack, it may get destroyed unless you laminate everything. Definitely good to have. Another thing I would add to this is you may want to include a hard picture of your loved ones. If you are traveling with your loved ones, or you left them behind and you went out on your own, but then you came back and they disappeared, and you need to ask somebody where they are, if they've seen them. If you have a hard photograph of your family member, you'd be able to show them to any police, fire, neighbor, anyone who might have seen them, and it could help. Then you need something to carry it all in, such as a backpack. And they're suggested for treks are about a 45-liter bag, such as this one. This has all sorts of MOLLE attachments on it that you can strap things on the outside, and then it's got a lot of storage inside. You could put your food, your clothes in different compartments, your medical gear on the outside, your water bottle on the outside, your sleeping bag you could clip on the outside, your canteen, etc. You would want something with a lot of MOLLE attachments to it, something that's in depth and that will carry all the things that we're talking about here, and if not, also a little bit more. Maybe some clothing, change of clothing, some bug spray, other things that we would potentially include in a bug out bag, a normal bug out survival bag that were not addressed here in the nuclear survival bag, that you might want to think about bringing along with you. I hope you found this list useful, and my comments to what the Canadian prepper suggested useful. You can find his video and watch him demonstrate all these things, and I just wanted to add a little bit of a personal touch to it from my training and experience and my time out in the law enforcement field and my survival experience. Some of these items are a little pricey, and you have time a little bit, we hope. I hope you never have to use this stuff, to be honest. But it's better to be prepared. I promise you, you won't regret being prepared. The only thing you would regret is not being prepared. And what teaches you these things? It just natural disasters like hurricanes, earthquakes, fires. I mean, Turkey has an earthquake that just hit it right now. These things happen, and you'd rather be prepared for than not be prepared. So I wanted to do my part to share this valuable information with you. I hope you found it useful. Please subscribe to my Substack and this YouTube channel if you really valued the information I provided you with today. I hope that you can share it with your friends and let them know how important this is, not only to you, your family, and your friends. And as a community, we can survive anything together as long as we stick together. So stay informed, stay vigilant, and until next time, ever forward.